Hey there everybody, hope you're all well. Welcome to the tabletop review of the Nikon Z7 II. It's not really a review as usual, it's just me going over some of the things I thought were interesting and covering some of the things I find not so hot and some of the things that are really good. So, all right, let's start off. First of all, one of the interesting things about Nikon is right now they're making 4 different cameras. So the Z50 is the APS-C Z camera that's kind of modern, and that's an individual body. And then the ZF-C is a unique thing. That's another APS-C, great vlogging camera, and a good video camera for in the field for the solo content creator. And then the Z6, Z6 II, Z7, Z7 II are all the same camera. They're all the same body, just with different sensors and very minor feature differences. But it's basically the same body. It's kind of hard to tell the difference between the Z6 II and the Z7 II by just looking at the bodies. And then, of course, the Z9, which is its own thing. Yeah. So the Z6, Z6 II, Z7, and Z7 II all share the same body, and they all have the same ergonomics. So anything that Nikon screwed up is going to be the same on all 4 of those cameras, and anything that's great on those cameras is going to be great. The good news is that pretty much the ergonomics, and this is somewhat subjective, but a lot of people have said this, and I concur. I've used Sony mirrorless and Fuji mirrorless, and so I have some experience, and I've held some Canons, but I have never used them, so I can't really make any conclusions there. But for me personally, I think that the Nikon Z6 series, Z7 series of cameras is one of the best ergonomically in their class. The grip is great. There's lots of customizable buttons. There's a top LCD display. It's a very robust and solid. They all are very robust and solid cameras. And according to Roger Cialis on Lens Rentals blog, who did a teardown of, I believe it was a Z7, and to paraphrase, he said it's engineering grade weather sealing versus marketing department weather sealing. So, you know, on the build side of things, they're definitely pro grade Nikon. It's the feature side that they're prosumer Nikon, and that's one of the quibbles. To cut to the chase, if you're coming from a D850, this is not a Z8. This is not the Z850. It's not that, and really it's only let down by the features, not necessarily the build or weather sealing. To cover that real quick, what we're missing, and these are on my minor quibbles, things I don't like, points. No 10-pin connector, no PC socket, no round eyepiece. And so that's a drag. If it had, honestly, if the Z7 II had all that, it would be a Z8. It could be a little faster. Do sports and action a little bit better. So I keep a couple of spare cards in my Mind Shift pouch. And the Z7 II takes the CF Express cards, which are interesting. I never had CF Express cards before, and so that was kind of something new that I had to get used to. There's some issues with CF Express cards. I mean, I know that they're the future and they're much faster than the SD cards and blah, 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 blah. I mean, they're saying 1700 MBS and 1480 read-write, etc. I have no doubt that the write speeds are there in the camera. What's interesting, I bought what I thought was a fast CF Express reader, and that's another thing. You're going to need a $50, $60 card reader to get these into your computer. I'm only getting about 120 megabytes per second upload to my computer with these. What I find interesting about that is with the SD cards, the fast UHS-2 SD cards, and that's not one of them, but I've got a few. I'm getting 170, 180 megabytes per second upload into my computer, and that's through a USB 3 card reader that's plugged into a USB slot. This is plugged into the same USB slot, and it's only giving me 120 megabytes per second upload. Not sure what the story is with that. Have to do some more research into that. But anyway, it takes it's dual cards now finally. I mean, what a stupid move that was on Nikon's part to make the original Z6, Z7 single card slot. But there it is. So personally, for the Z7 II, I think it would have been just fine to have two UHS-2 SD card slots. I mean, it's not really a sports and action camera. It's really suited for landscape, but more on that later. And so two UHS-2 and weddings and studio stuff, you know, more slower paced, high resolution stuff. So I mean, it's not a Z8. It's not a Z850 or D850 replacement. And so two UHS-2 card slots would have been fine. But I guess, you know, the other thing is like the CF Express cards are expensive. I think this Sony card was like $200. You can get them on sale for like $120, $130. I got a couple of Lexars for $120, $130 over the holiday. But yeah, here we go. So yeah. But like I said, two cards are great for studio shoots, fashion shoots, wedding shoots. Landscape, not so much, but I guess the redundancy is there. People say that if you write to both cards, the camera will get a little slower because the writing to the SD card is slower. Yeah, I'll take their word for it. I've never, you know, I don't write to two cards, so it's not a problem for me. So there's your articulation on your rear LCD. That's pretty much it. It folds down to that, about 45 degrees. And it'll go 90 degrees up, just like the Z6 II. It's good when you put that mirror thing in here and you're trying to do solo video, you can see what's going on, so that works. But when you go vertical, that's all you get. So it doesn't come up this way. It's a one-axis flippy screen. It's better than no flippy screen. But it's not, that is a drawback a little bit in this day and age. Really should have had a better flippy screen. I think at least the 3-axis or 2-axis where you could go vertical and horizontal. So that's kind of a drawback. But having said that, the rear LCD is 2+ million dots. It's a really good touchscreen also. I don't use touchscreens that often, but I'm starting to use it more now that it actually functions properly. It's a good implementation of a touchscreen. So the EVF is 3.6 million dots. It displays 3.6 million dots all the time. And, you know, the marketing departments of other camera companies like to boast, you know, 5 million dots and 7 million dots and all this. But what the problem with all that is that when you actually turn the camera on and go to use it, it drops down to 2 million dots or something. So it's all over the place. You don't get the 5 million or the 8 million dots or whatever it is all the time. So Nikon took a different approach, and they're going to give you a good readout regardless of what you're doing. With the limitations that come with that, from what I understand, during high-speed action, taking multiple shots, the EVF blacks out a little bit. I have not experienced that. It's not the kind of thing I do. In the studio, shooting weddings or fashion or landscapes, I don't think you're ever going to see it. So yeah, again, it's not a D850, it's not a Z8. And so the EVF is clear, it's bright, the color is good, it's eminently usable. It really works great, I think. So, and 3.6 million dots is enough to check critical focus 1-to-1. So I'm happy with the EVF. I think it's great to use and works well. Moving on to the autofocus, Tom Hogan says that you need to learn it. It's not as good on idiot mode as, let's say, the Sonys, because they're the ones that all the hypesters on YouTube are saying is the uber best, greatest of all time autofocus. And Tom Hogan says on idiot mode, it's not as good. And that's maybe why those influencers think that Sony is better, because, well, you draw your own conclusions there. But Tom Hogan says if you take the time to control the autofocus and learn how to use it, it's probably better than Sony and more accurate. And so there is that. My experience is that I think the autofocus works great. I really think it's as magical as Sony. I don't do sports and action, but what I do need is eye detect video AF. And honestly, the Nikons work as well as the Sonys. It picks up my eye. And in the studio, in my office, it's 100%. I trust it completely. And in the field, I trust it's like 98%. And I trust it enough that I know that that most of my video, and I mean like 99 to 100% of my video, is going to be totally usable as is. The only other camera that I have, well, I have experience with the Sonys, and they were good for video in the field. The Fujis were not. And the X-T4 was not very good at eye autofocus. Thomas Heaton has an interesting video on his Fuji X-T4s in terms of using them for video, and I would reference that. And that was kind of my experience too. The bottom line with the Fujis is set everything to auto. But the AF on the Z7 II and Z6 II for that matter, and ZFC, I think works fantastic. I think it's great. So the Z7 II has 2 processors built in. It'll do 10 frames per second. I've never done it. It has a big buffer, so I'm told. You can get about 60 shots before it slows down to the CF Express card. I've never done it, but I think that's terrific. It's nice to have more capacity than you need. So the sensor in the camera, we'll just pop this 14 to 30 lens off, is nice and big, and there it is. Wow, look at that. That's exciting. So it is about 46 megapixels. Its base ISO is 64. The dynamic range is best in class. It has great high ISO performance. And honestly, the draw to the whole system for me, for why I went with Nikon, was literally this sensor and its IQ, and this camera and the image quality that it produces. That's what keeps me with Nikon. I'm used to shooting the Fujis at this point after a year of using them pretty intensely, and I really enjoy the Fujis. I'm getting used to the Nikons, and the more that I use them, the easier they get to use. Not that they're hard to use, but I just can't argue with the image quality. The JPEG straight out of camera are fantastic, and the RAWs need very, very little processing, if any, to get them to look exactly the way I want them to. When I see a photograph made with these Nikons, it just looks like a photograph should look, in my opinion. I know that's subjective, but it just gets me so much closer to where I want to be. I could easily see myself shooting with these cameras and taking the results. And I mean, it just makes my life easier on the video side, on the image quality side. But my main draw is landscape photography. My other main landscape camera is a 4x5 film camera. So I have really high, standards, I would guess. I mean, it has to be up to the level of satisfying me and my quest for 4x5, etc. And this sensor does it. As a side note, I did shoot the A7R4 Sony 60 megapixel. I don't see much of a difference, if any. I think they're both capable of accomplishing pretty much the same thing. The Nikon lenses, the ZS lenses, are totally up to the 45 megapixels. And so the holy trinity of Nikon landscape lenses starts with this 14 to 30 f4S for wide angle, and then the 24 to 70 f4 ZS lens. And then for telephoto, I have the 70 to 300 AFP that I made a couple of videos on, and I like that a lot. But one caveat, get the FTZ2 adapter, because the FTZ1 adapter is not very easy to use. Video wise, you've got 4K 60 with a minor crop. The video quality is not as good as the Z6 II, which oversamples from the full sensor, but the video quality is great in a pinch, and it's great for B-roll or with the great AF and the in-body image stabilization, which is another thing to mention. Another highlight of the Z system is the time-lapse is excellent. Outstanding IQ, and it builds the file in the camera so you know what you've got in the field, which is huge. I mean, many times I've done time-lapses only to come home to process them in my computer and find out I didn't get what I wanted. the time lapse is probably best in class, the time lapse feature. Also, these cameras do focus stacking, which really works a treat. So that's another positive. The Z6 II is the better hybrid camera. It has better video with a solid 24 megapixel stills and is a lot of fun to shoot with. I really enjoy shooting with the Z6 II. The Z7 II is more of a studio portrait camera or landscape camera. The colors are great. I love the IQ out of camera. I talked about that, but it's probably best in class for landscapes because of the ISO 64 base ISO and the huge dynamic range, which is really great. Once you get used to the dynamic range of a Z7 II, it's hard to shoot with anything else. And of course, the 46 megapixels and all these excellent ZS lenses that some of them are again, best in class. Excellent time-lapse capabilities. And we already talked about the lenses that I recommend for lightweight landscape use. So if you're coming from a D750 or a D600, you will love this Z7 II. You'll be very happy as a higher megapixel upgrade. Now, if you're coming from a D850 like we talked about, it's not a Z8 or a D850 level replacement pro camera, but it's a worthy prosumer camera in its own right. Again, if it had the build quality, I believe, is pro level Nikon and the weather sealing, it's just missing the features that pro level Nikons have that we talked about. The PC socket, the 10-pin connector, the round eyepiece, you know, and there's a few other things, but those are the big ones. So minor complaints, and this is really nitpicky. It's more of a just psychologically bothers me, the first one. And that's that in manual focus, there's no distance scale or depth of field scale anywhere in the whole system. Yeah, not sure what that's all about. It's not on the lenses or in the bodies. The bodies give you an idiot bar with a flower and an infinity symbol. So you can't set any of your focus distance to 10 feet. That just doesn't give you a capacity to do that. I think that's a real oversight. And there's no depth of field scale either. So just, you know, if you like to use manual focus, you know, the good news is the autofocus is excellent. There's no 10-pin connector, no PC socket, no round eyepiece. We talked about that. There's no countdown timer during long exposures like the Fujis have. That would have been nice. It's really a pain in the butt to do a 60 or 70 second astro shot and not know where you're at and just stand there waiting for the thing to be done. It's nice to have some indication of where you are. Another thing that's kind of a little bit of a small issue is that the level is small and difficult to see the green bar when it's level. The level should be assignable to a custom button versus scrolling through the displays. Yeah, that's really annoying. And the totally clear screen should be added to the scroll option and not on the record button or as a customizable button. That's ridiculous. That they've actually got that backwards. That was added as an afterthought because they forgot about it on the Z6, Z7. But that's backwards. If you're going to break anything out of that display button scroll thing, bust out the level, because I'd like to assign that to one of those front function buttons. And the clear screen, so you can check your composition, that should be part of the scrolling through the display options. And my last minor complaint is I think the joystick could be used for more than what it's used for. It would be nice if there were more customizable options for the joystick and if it actually did more things than what it actually does. So other than that, that's what I think of the Z7 II. I think it's a fantastic camera, and this is the camera that actually makes me stick with Nikon. I've got a aftermarket Kingma L bracket on there. I think I paid about 30 bucks for that, and it works great. If I want to get to stuff on the side here, this will pop out, which is kind of nice. Here, let me show you that. If I want to get to stuff here on the side, I can slide this bit out here. It comes out to about here if I want to run cables and things in there and still do, well, it's kind of quirky. I don't really use it for that. But on my video cameras, the cameras I use mainly for video, I don't run an L bracket. But this is my main stills camera for landscapes, and so I do run the L bracket on that and just kind of leave it there. Yeah, fantastic camera. It's the camera that keeps me in the Z system. And it's the image quality that does it. It's just absolutely phenomenal. I could see a difference in my 8x10 prints for my box set. Not that the Fuji prints were bad, it's just that once I got to the Z7 II prints, it was like, yeah, I could see a difference. And that was huge. So that's why I'm shooting the Z7 II moving forward. I still shoot the Fujis, but I use them for different things. So, but for my ultimate landscape digital images, the Z7 II is the camera for me. Hey, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications. I appreciate it. And we'll see you out there. Bye.